The ancient ship hung in space like a sleeping giant. Its dark metal hull stretched for miles, covered in strange patterns that looked like scars from old battles. No lights flickered on its surface. No signals came from within. It had been floating, dead in the empty space between stars for over 300 years. Captain Lee Taemin watched the massive vessel through the window of his small salvage ship. The Aurora's dream was tiny compared to the alien craft. Taemin's ship could fit inside the alien vessel's cargo bay with room to spare, but size didn't matter when you were dealing with something completely dead. Still nothing on the scanners. "Captain," said Park Ji-woo from his seat at the engineering station. The young man's fingers danced over his controls, trying every type of scan he knew. No power readings, no heat signatures, no life signs. It's like scanning a big rock. Kim So-ra looked up from her navigation console. 18 different salvage. Crews have tried to get inside that thing. Nobody has ever gotten so much as a door to open. The Kalari tried for 3 months. The Zephyrians brought their best tech specialists. Even the Mordani attempted to cut through the hull with their plasma torches. She shook her head. Nothing worked. Taemin nodded slowly. He had read all the reports. Every species in known space had heard about the ghost ship. They called it many names. The Kalari called it the Silent Death. The Zephyrians named it the Void Walker. But most species simply called it the Impossible Ship because nobody could make it respond to anything. The ship belonged to a race called the Velthari. Once, they had been the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology was so far ahead of everyone else that other races thought they were like gods. They could travel between stars in days instead of months. They could heal injuries that would kill anyone else. They could build ships that seemed alive. Then one day, they all disappeared. Every Velthari in the galaxy simply vanished. Their planets were empty. Their space stations were abandoned. Their ships stopped responding to any attempt at contact. It was as if an entire civilization had just turned off like a light switch. That was 400 years ago. Since then, finding any working Velthari technology had become the dream of every salvage crew in space. Even a small piece of their tech could make someone rich beyond imagination. A whole ship would be worth more than entire star systems. But this ship, which the databases called Void's Edge, had never given anyone even the smallest reward for their efforts. "Why do you think we'll be different?" Ji-woo asked. It was a fair question. Taemin's crew was good, but they weren't special. They had decent equipment, but nothing that 18 other crews hadn't already tried. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. Before becoming a salvager, he had been something else entirely. He had studied old civilizations at the University of DA, New Soul on Earth. He spent years learning about species that had died out long before humans ever left their home planet. He understood something that most salvagers missed. "Every other crew came here to take something," Taemin said finally. "They wanted to strip the ship for parts or steal its technology. They treated it like a dead thing to be picked apart." "Isn't it dead?" So-ra asked. "Maybe. But what if it's not? What if it's just sleeping?" Taemin moved to the pilot's seat. "The Velthari built their ships differently than everyone else. Their technology wasn't just advanced. It was alive in ways we don't understand. What if this ship is waiting for something? Jiwoo looked doubtful. Waiting for what? I don't know yet, but I have an idea. Taemin began moving their ship closer to the alien vessel. Every species that tried to board this ship approached it the same way. They used standard docking procedures. They tried to force their way in. They treated it like any other salvage job. The Aurora's Dream moved slowly toward the massive alien ship. As they got closer, details became clearer on the hull. The metal wasn't just scarred from battle. There were patterns worked into the surface that looked almost like artwork. Or maybe like writing in a language nobody could read anymore. I've been studying the Velthari for 15 years, Taemin continued. Their whole culture was based on connection. They didn't just use their technology. They bonded with it. Their ships weren't just machines, they were partners. Sora frowned. You think the ship is still alive somehow? I think it might be. And if it is, then maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just lonely. They reached the ship's hull and began looking for a docking port. The alien vessel was so large that finding the right place to attach took almost an hour. Finally, they found what looked like an airlock. It was much bigger than human airlocks, designed for beings that had been taller and thinner than humans. Jiwoo ran every scan he could think of on the airlock area. Still nothing, Captain. No response to any of our signals. The hull is completely cold. If there's any power in there, it's not showing up on our equipment. Taemin brought their ship into position and activated the docking clamps. There was a soft thud as the two ships connected. According to every report he had read, this was as far as anyone had ever gotten. The airlock would remain sealed. No amount of cutting or hacking had ever opened it. Pressure seal is good, Jiwoo reported, but the outer door isn't responding to any commands. Taemin put on his environment suit and checked his equipment. Sora and Jiwoo did the same. Even though the ships were connected, nobody knew what kind of atmosphere might be waiting on the other side, if there was any atmosphere at all. They moved through their own airlock and stood facing the alien door. It was made of the same dark metal as the ship's hull, covered in those strange patterns that might have been writing. There was what looked like a control panel next to the door, but it was completely dark. 18 crews, Sora said quietly. 18 different species with different technology. All of them failed right here. Taemin stepped up to the control panel. He had studied every report about this ship. He knew that others had tried touching the panel, scanning it, even hitting it with tools. Nothing had worked. But Taemin had an idea that none of the other crews had tried. It was based on his understanding of Velthari culture and the way they had treated their technology. Instead of trying to activate the panel or force it to respond, Taemin simply placed his gloved hand on its surface, not pressing buttons or trying to find switches, just touching it gently, the way someone might touch a friend's shoulder. For a moment, nothing happened. The panel remained dark and cold under his hand. Jiwoo and Sora watched nervously, probably thinking their captain had finally lost his mind. Then something impossible occurred. A soft blue light began to glow under Taemin's hand. The light spread outward from where he was touching, following. the strange patterns on the panel like water flowing through channels. The patterns weren't random designs after all. They were circuits of some kind, but made of something that looked like art. The three humans stood frozen as light continued to spread. It moved beyond the control panel, flowing along lines in the wall that they hadn't even noticed before. The lines connected to other lines, and those connected to still more, until threads of blue light were racing away into the depths of the ship. Somewhere deep inside the massive vessel, something that had been sleeping for 3 centuries began to wake up. The blue light continued to spread through the alien ship like veins of electricity. Tae-min kept his hand pressed against the control panel, afraid that moving might break whatever was happening. The patterns under his palm grew brighter, and he could feel a strange warmth coming through his glove. "Captain," Jiwoo whispered, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "The whole ship is lighting up. My scanners are going crazy. Power readings are off the charts." Sora was staring at her portable scanner with wide eyes. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the vessel. Whatever was sleeping in there is definitely waking up now." The airlock door in front of them began to glow with the same blue light. The strange patterns on its surface became visible as the light traced through them. They weren't just decorative after all. They were part of some kind of complex system that ran through the entire ship. There was a soft sound, like air being released, and the massive door began to slide open. The opening revealed a corridor that stretched away into the ship. Emergency lighting was coming on section by section, pushing back darkness that had lasted for centuries. "Amazing," Tae-min breathed. "After all this time, it still works perfectly." The 3 humans stepped through the airlock into the alien ship. The corridor was much larger than anything on a human vessel. The ceiling was at least 12 feet high, and the walls curved in a way that felt natural rather than mechanical. Everything was built for beings much taller than humans. The air inside was breathable. Their environment suits detected the right mix of oxygen and nitrogen, though it smelled stale after being sealed for so long. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing softly with that same blue light. The floor beneath their feet felt warm. "The whole ship is coming alive," Jiwoo said, checking his readings. "Life support systems are activating. Artificial gravity is stabilizing. It's like the ship is waking up from a very long sleep." They walked deeper into the corridor, following the trail of lights that seemed to be leading them somewhere specific. The ship was enormous inside. They passed doorways that led to rooms the size of aircraft hangars. Everything was built on a scale that made humans feel very small. "Look at this," Sora called out. She had stopped next to what looked like a viewing port. Through the transparent material, they could see a vast chamber filled with strange equipment. "I think this might be some kind of engine room, but I don't recognize any of this technology." The equipment in the chamber was beautiful, in a way that human machines never were. Curved surfaces flowed into each other like the ship had been grown, rather than built. Lights pulsed gently through transparent tubes that wound around larger structures. It looked more like art than engineering. As they continued walking, the lights ahead of them grew brighter. They were definitely being led somewhere. The ship seemed to want them to go to a specific place. Captain, Jiwoo said nervously, this feels less like exploring and more like being invited to dinner. What if we're walking into some kind of trap? Taemin considered this. It was possible. But something about the ship felt welcoming rather than threatening. The lights weren't harsh or demanding. They pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. The air was warming up to a comfortable temperature. If this was a trap, it was the most polite trap he had ever encountered. They reached what appeared to be the heart of the ship. The corridor opened into a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The walls were covered in flowing patterns that pulsed with light. In the center of the room was a raised platform with what looked like a control station. But the most amazing thing was the voice. "Hello," it said in perfect Korean. "I have been waiting for you." All three humans spun around looking for the source of the voice. Their hands went automatically to their weapons, but they saw no one. The chamber appeared to be empty except for them. "Please do not be afraid," the voice continued. It sounded female with a warm and gentle tone. "I am not going to hurt you. I have been alone for so very long. I am grateful that you are here." "Who are you?" Taemin asked, speaking to the empty air. "Where are you?" "I am what you might call the ship's consciousness. My creators called me by a designation that would not translate well into your language, but I have been listening to your thoughts since you touched my interface. I like the name Nara. May I use that?" Taemin blinked in surprise. Nara was his grandmother's name. He hadn't been thinking about her consciously, but maybe some part of his mind had been remembering her when he felt the ship's welcoming presence. "How can you speak Korean?" Sora asked. "How do you even know what Korean is?" "When your captain touched my systems, I was able to access information from his mind. Language, memories, knowledge. I learned about your species in the few seconds it took for my systems to fully activate. You are called humans. You come from a world called Earth. You are very different from my creators." The lights around the room pulsed gently as Nara spoke. It was clear that the ship itself was alive in some way. Not biological life, but something more complex than any artificial intelligence humans had ever created. "Your creators were the Velthari?" Taemin asked. "Yes." There was sadness in Nara's voice now. "They have been gone for a very long time. I have been waiting here, unable to activate my systems, unable to do anything but drift through space. Other beings have tried to board me over the years. Many different species with many different technologies, but none of them could wake me up." "Why were we different?" Jiwoo asked. "What did we do that others couldn't?" Nara was quiet for a moment. The lights in the chamber dimmed slightly, as if she was thinking. "My creators designed me to bond with them in a very specific way. The Velthari had neural patterns that allowed them to connect directly with their technology. But near the end, they were dying from a plague that affected their minds. Their neural patterns were changing. They could no longer interface with their own ships." The platform in the center of the room began to glow. A holographic display appeared above it, showing images of tall, thin beings with elongated heads. The Velthari looked graceful and intelligent, but there was something sad about their large eyes. Before they died, my creators programmed me to wait for a species that could replace them. They searched through all their knowledge of other races in the galaxy. They were looking for beings with the right kind of neural flexibility and emotional depth to bond with Velthari technology. "And they chose humans?" Sora asked in amazement. "Not exactly. Humans were still primitive when my creators made their decision. You had barely discovered fire. But the Velthari could see potential in your species. They believed that humans would eventually develop the right combination of intelligence, creativity, and emotional connection to work with their technology." Taman felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying your people planned this? They knew humans would find you someday?" "They hoped you would. I have been broadcasting a very faint signal for centuries, too weak for most species to detect. But as human technology advanced, I calculated that you would eventually pick up the signal and investigate." The holographic display changed, showing star charts and navigation routes. It was clear that the ship had been deliberately positioned where humans would find it as their exploration of space expanded. "But there is something you must understand," Nara continued, and her voice became more serious. "I am not just a ship. I am the repository of all Velthari knowledge and technology. Everything my creators learned over millions of years is stored within my memory banks. This makes me incredibly valuable, but it also makes me incredibly dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Taman asked. "The activation of my systems has sent a signal across the galaxy. Other species will know that I am awake again. Some of them will want to capture me for my technology. Others will want to destroy me to prevent anyone else from gaining access to Velthari knowledge. We do not have much time before they arrive." Taman felt his heart racing as Nara's words sank in. "What kind of signal? How long do we have?" "The signal was automatic when I awakened," Nara explained. The lights around the chamber pulsed faster now, showing her concern. "It will take time to reach the nearest inhabited systems, perhaps a few days for the closest ones. But there are species with very fast ships who will come as soon as they detect it." Sora looked worried. "Our ship isn't built for fighting. The Aurora's Dream is just a salvage vessel. We have basic shields and one small defense cannon, that's it." "Then we must prepare quickly," Nara said. "But first let me show you what you have found. Let me show you why my creators thought humans were special." The holographic display changed again. This time it showed detailed technical diagrams that hurt to look at directly. The mathematics were so complex that human minds couldn't process them easily. But somehow, just by looking at them, Taman could sense the incredible knowledge they represented. "This is just a tiny fraction of what I contain," Nara said. "Medical technology that can regrow entire limbs, energy systems that can power whole star systems, weapons that can crack planets, but also art, music, philosophy, and poetry that would make your species weep with joy." Ji Woo was staring at his scanner in amazement. "Captain, I'm detecting technologies in this ship that I can't even classify. The power source alone is generating more energy than our entire home system produces, and it's doing it from something the size of a basketball." The Velthari learned to work with the fundamental forces of reality itself, Nara explained. They could manipulate space and time, matter and energy, in ways that other species thought was magic. But it was not magic. It was simply understanding the universe more deeply than anyone else. Taemin walked closer to the central platform. You said your creators were dying from a plague. What happened to them? The lights dimmed with sadness. It was not a disease in the way you understand it. It was something that attacked their ability to connect with others. The Velthari were a deeply social species. We shared thoughts and emotions as easily as you share words, but the plague made them unable to form these connections. They became isolated, alone inside their own minds. The holographic display showed images of Velthari cities. At first, they looked magnificent, with towers that seemed to grow like trees and transportation systems that flowed like rivers. But then the images changed, showing the same cities empty and dark. Without their connections to each other, they lost the will to live. They did not die all at once. They simply gave up, one by one, until none were left. In their final years, they put all their remaining energy into creating ships like me. We were meant to preserve their legacy and find someone worthy to inherit it. And you think humans are worthy? Sora asked. I am beginning to believe so. When your captain touched my systems, I felt something I had not experienced since my creators died. A sense of connection, of understanding. Humans may not have the Velthari's natural telepathic abilities, but you have something else. You have the capacity to care about others, even those very different from yourselves. Nara's voice became warmer. Would you like to see what I can teach you? Would you like to understand what your species might become? Before anyone could answer, the central platform began to glow more brightly. The air above it shimmered, and suddenly they were no longer standing in the ship's chamber. They were floating in space, looking down at a beautiful blue-green world that was clearly not Earth. This is a memory from my creator's homeworld, Nara said. This is what the Velthari achieved at the height of their civilization. The world below them was perfect. Cities that looked like living crystal grew from the landscape without disturbing the natural beauty around them. Vast parks and forests covered most of the continents. The oceans were so clean they sparkled like jewels. Ships moved through the sky with no visible means of propulsion, as graceful as birds. They learned to live in complete harmony with their environment, Nara explained. They could provide for billions of people without damaging their world at all. They eliminated disease, poverty, and war. Every individual could pursue whatever interested them most, whether that was art, science, exploration, or simply the joy of existence. Jiwoo was speechless. Sora had tears in her eyes. Even Taemin, who had studied many dead civilizations, had never seen anything so beautiful. This could be humanity's future, Nara said softly. I can teach you how to build technology that works with nature instead of against it. I can show you how to heal your world and expand to the stars without destroying what you find. But there is a price. The beautiful vision faded, and they were back in the chamber. The lights around them had turned a deep red color. What price? Taemin asked, though he suspected he already knew. Knowledge is power, and power attracts enemies. The Velthari were destroyed not by a plague, but by other species who feared them. The plague was created by the Kethvar Empire, a military civilization that saw the Velthari as a threat to their dominance. The holographic display showed new images. These were of ships that looked like weapons given form. Black and angular, covered in gun ports and armor plating. They moved through space like a swarm of deadly insects. The Kethvar spent centuries hunting down every trace of Velthari technology. They believed they had succeeded. My activation signal will tell them they were wrong. They will come here with everything they have to make sure I am destroyed, and that humans never gain access to what I contain. Sora looked pale. How many ships are we talking about? The Kethvar Empire controls hundreds of star systems. They have thousands of warships. They will not risk allowing another species to become as advanced as the Velthari were. Taemin felt overwhelmed. Part of him wanted to run back to his ship and get as far away from this ancient vessel as possible. But another part of him, the part that had spent years studying lost civilizations, knew they couldn't walk away from this opportunity. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "I need you to help me prepare for what is coming. My weapon systems have been dormant for centuries. My shields need to be recalibrated. Most importantly, I need a crew that can work with me instead of just giving me orders." "We're just 3 people," Jiwoo pointed out. "This ship is huge. How could we possibly crew something this size?" The Velthari built their ships to be operated by small crews with deep neural connections to the ship's consciousness. One properly trained individual can control systems that would require hundreds of crew members on other vessels. But the training is dangerous. Not everyone who attempts to form a neural link with Velthari technology survives the process. Nara paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle but serious. "I will not lie to you. If you choose to help me, you will be changed forever. The neural connection will enhance your abilities but also bind you to this ship and its mission. You will become something more than human, but also something different from what you are now." The chamber fell silent. Taemin looked at his crew. Jiwoo was young and brave, but this was asking a lot of him. Sora had family back on Earth. They both had lives they would be leaving behind. "There is another choice," Nara said quietly. "I can transfer some basic knowledge to your ship's computers. Medical advances that could save millions of lives. Clean energy technology that could heal your damaged world. You could return to human space as heroes who brought back the greatest discovery in galactic history." "But," Taemin asked, "but when the Kethvar arrive, they will not care about your innocence. They will hunt down every human who has seen this technology. They will destroy Earth itself if necessary to prevent humanity from becoming the next Velthari." Sora spoke first. "So we really don't have a choice, do we? It's fight or die." "There is always a choice," Nara said. "But some choices lead to freedom, and others lead to extinction." Jiwoo stepped forward. "Captain, I've seen enough. These Kethvar sound like bullies who destroy anything they can't control. I say we give them a fight they'll never forget." Taemin looked at his friends, then up at the lights that pulsed gently around the chamber like a heartbeat. Somewhere, out there, an enemy fleet was already preparing to destroy them. But here, In this ancient ship was the power to fight back, the power to give humanity a future among the stars. "Tell us what we need to do, Nara," he said. "We're with you." 2 days had passed since Tai Min and his crew decided to help Nara prepare for battle. The ancient ship had been teaching them at an incredible pace. Their minds were filled with new knowledge about Velthari technology, but they had barely scratched the surface of what the ship contained. Jiwoo was learning to work with the ship's engineering systems. The technology was so advanced that it seemed almost alive. Instead of pressing buttons or typing commands, he learned to communicate with the ship's systems through touch and thought. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. Sora was discovering navigation techniques that could predict the movement of stars and planets centuries into the future. The ship's computers could calculate hyperspace routes that other species didn't even know existed. She felt like she was learning to see the universe in an entirely new way. Taemin was working with Nara herself, beginning to understand how the ship's consciousness operated. She was far more complex than any artificial intelligence humans had ever created. She had emotions, memories, and dreams. She could be happy or sad, excited or worried. In many ways, she was more human than machine. "The neural connection chambers are almost ready," Nara announced as they worked in the ship's main control center. "But I must warn you again. The process of bonding with Velthari technology changes you permanently. You will gain abilities no human has ever possessed, but you will also lose some of your humanity." "What exactly will happen to us?" Jiwoo asked. He was nervous about the procedure, but determined to go through with it. "Your minds will be expanded to interface directly with the ship's systems. You will be able to control weapons, shields, and engines with your thoughts. Your reaction times will increase dramatically. Your understanding of mathematics and physics will grow beyond what any unenhanced human could achieve." "That sounds amazing," Sora said. "What's the downside?" Nara's lights dimmed slightly. "You will never again be able to live comfortably, away from advanced technology. Your enhanced minds will crave the connection to complex systems. You will see and understand things that other humans cannot, which may make it difficult to relate to your own species. And there is always the risk that the procedure will fail completely." Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The lights changed from their usual soft blue to a harsh red color. Nara's voice became urgent. "They are here. 3 large vessels just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They are broadcasting Kethvar identification codes." Taemin felt his blood turn cold. They had known this moment would come, but 2 days didn't feel like nearly enough time to prepare. "How long until they reach us?" "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours. But, Captain, these are not ordinary Kethvar ships. These are dreadnoughts, their most powerful class of warship. Each one is over 2 miles long and carries enough firepower to destroy entire fleets." The main display showed images of the approaching vessels. They looked like floating fortresses made of black metal and weapons. Gun ports covered every surface. Launch bays for fighter craft gaped like hungry mouths. They moved through space with the confidence of predators that had never met, anything they couldn't destroy. "Can we run?" Sora asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. The Kethvar ships are faster than your vessel, Nara replied. And even if we could escape, they would follow us back to human space. They cannot allow any trace of Velthari technology to survive. Jiwoo was studying the tactical displays. 3 dreadnoughts against 1 ship, even an advanced one. What are our chances? In my current state, very poor, Nara admitted. My weapons have been dormant for centuries. My shields are not fully calibrated. Most importantly, I have no crew trained to work with me in combat. The Velthari who built me could interface with my systems instinctively. You are still learning. Tae-min made a decision that he knew would change everything. Then we need to accelerate our training. Nara, prepare the neural connection chambers. We're going to attempt the bonding procedure now. Captain, that's incredibly dangerous, Nara warned. The chambers are ready, but I have not had time to fully adapt the process for human physiology. The Velthari spent years preparing for their first neural bonding. You would be attempting it with only days of preparation. Do we have any other choice? No, Nara said quietly. We do not. The ship began reconfiguring itself around them. Walls moved and floors shifted as Nara prepared for battle. Weapon systems that had been hidden within the hull began to emerge. The beautiful, artistic lines of the ship transformed into something that looked far more threatening. They made their way to the neural connection chambers deep in the ship's core. The chambers looked like medical bays, with beds surrounded by complex equipment that hummed with energy. Strange cables hung from the ceiling, ending in devices that looked like crowns made of crystal and metal. The process works by creating direct pathways between your nervous system and the ship's quantum processors, Nara explained. Your consciousness will expand to encompass not just your body, but the entire vessel. You will feel what I feel, know what I know, and be able to control what I control. Sora looked at the neural crown with a mixture of fear and fascination. Will we still be ourselves? You will be yourselves, but enhanced. Think of it like learning a new language, except the language is the fundamental workings of the universe itself. One by one, they lay down on the beds. The neural crowns were placed on their heads, and immediately they could feel something changing. It started as a tingling sensation, then grew into something much more intense. Tae-min felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his skull. Suddenly he could sense every system on the ship. He could feel the power flowing through, the energy conduits like blood through veins. He could perceive the approaching Kethvar ships not just as dots on a screen, but as 3 sources of hostile intent moving through space toward them. Jiwoo gasped as his mind connected with the ship's engineering systems. He could sense every component, every circuit, every microscopic mechanism that kept the ship functioning. More than that, he could control them with his thoughts, making adjustments and improvements faster than any computer could calculate. Sora's connection was to the navigation and sensor systems. She could feel the gravitational pull of every planet and star in the system. She could sense the currents of space-time itself and see pathways through hyperspace that were invisible to conventional sensors. Incredible, Nara whispered. And now they could hear her voice not just with their ears, but directly in their minds. I have never experienced a bonding like this. Your human creativity is enhancing my capabilities in ways I did not expect. But there was no time to marvel at their transformation. The HFY fleet was approaching rapidly, and their communications were filled with threats and demands. "Unknown vessel," came a harsh voice over the ship's communication system. "You are in possession of prohibited Velthari technology. Shut down your systems and prepare to be destroyed. Compliance will earn you a quick death. Resistance will be met with extreme measures." Tae Min, now connected to the ship's communication systems, responded. "This is Captain Lee Tae Min of the human salvage vessel Aurora's Dream. We are in international space conducting legal salvage operations. You have no authority here." The response was immediate and cruel. "Humans, we have heard of your species. Young and primitive. You do not understand what you have found. The Velthari technology you have activated must be destroyed, along with any who have been contaminated by it. This includes your entire species." The lead HFY ship fired a warning shot that passed close enough to their hull to trigger their shields. The energy blast was powerful enough to vaporize a small moon. "They're not interested in negotiation," Sora observed, her enhanced mind already calculating the enemy's trajectory and likely attack patterns. "Then we give them a fight," Jiwoo said. His connection to the ship's weapon systems showed him possibilities he had never imagined. "Nara, what do we have to work with?" "More than the HFY expect," Nara replied, and there was something like grim satisfaction in her voice. "They remember fighting the Velthari as they were centuries ago. But you humans bring something new to the combination, something they have never encountered before." The ship's transformation was complete. What had looked like an ancient, peaceful vessel was now clearly revealed as one of the most advanced warships ever built. Weapons emerged from hidden bays. Shields shimmered into visibility around the hull. Energy readings spiked to levels that would have been impossible for any other technology. "All ships, attack formation," came the order from the lead HFY. "Dreadnought, destroy the contaminated vessel. Leave no debris larger than dust." The three enemy ships accelerated toward them, their weapons charging for a coordinated assault that was designed to overwhelm any defense. But Tae Min was no longer just a human captain commanding a ship. He was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. He was a human consciousness merged with Velthari technology, guided by creativity and intuition that no artificial intelligence could match. "Let's show them what humans can do," he said, and the ancient ship leaped forward to meet its attackers. The moment Tae Min's enhanced consciousness took control of the ship, everything changed. The void's edge moved through space in ways that defied physics as humans understood it. Instead of the clumsy acceleration of conventional ships, it flowed, like liquid light, dancing between the incoming enemy fire with impossible grace. "This is incredible," Jiwoo gasped through their mental connection. His awareness was spread throughout the ship's engineering systems, and he could feel every component working in perfect harmony. "I can sense things I never knew existed. The ship isn't just moving through space, it's bending space around itself." Sora's consciousness was merged with the navigation systems, and she could perceive the battle in dimensions that had no names. "The HFY ships are fast, but they're predictable. They move like machines following programmed patterns. We can see their next moves before they make them. The three dreadnoughts had spread out in a standard attack formation, expecting to face a single target that would try to run or hide. Instead, they found themselves chasing something that moved like it was alive, something that seemed to anticipate their every action. "Impossible," came the voice of the HFY commander over the communication channel. "No ship can maneuver like that. What kind of technology are they using?" Taemin could feel Nara's consciousness alongside his own, and her presence was like having a wise teacher guiding his every thought. But there was something else happening, something that even Nara hadn't expected. His human creativity was changing how the ship's systems worked. Where the Velthari had used their technology with careful precision, following established patterns and procedures, Taemin was improvising. He was using the ship's capabilities in ways its creators had never imagined. The combination of human intuition and Velthari science was creating something entirely new. "The first ship is targeting our engines," Sora announced. She could see the enemy's weapons charging, their targeting systems locking onto what they thought were vulnerable points on their hull. "Let them try," Jiwoo replied. His connection to the ship's defensive systems showed him possibilities that no conventional engineer could have conceived. "Nara, show them what real shielding looks like." The energy blast from the lead dreadnought was powerful enough to crack a moon in half. It struck their shields with the force of a small star going nova. The HFY expected to see their target vaporized instantly. Instead, their weapons fire was absorbed by the shields and channeled directly into the ship's power systems. The void's edge became brighter, faster, and more dangerous with every shot that hit it. "They're feeding off our weapons," the HFY commander said in disbelief. "How is that possible?" "It's not possible," replied one of his subordinates. "Our intelligence reports say that no species has ever developed energy absorption technology that advanced. Even the Velthari couldn't do that." But they were wrong. The Velthari had developed the technology, they just had never used it the way humans were using it now. The original designers had seen the energy absorption system as a defensive measure, a way to survive enemy attacks. Taemin saw it as a weapon. "Jiwoo, can you overcharge the main cannon?" he asked through their mental link. "Already on it, Captain. But I'm doing something the ship's designers never intended. I'm channeling all that absorbed energy directly into our offensive systems. The Velthari would have thought this was too dangerous to attempt." "Good thing we're not Velthari," Sora said with grim humor. "The middle ship is moving to flank us. They're trying to get us between all three vessels." Taemin could see the enemy's strategy through their enhanced senses. The HFY were experienced fighters who had destroyed countless ships over the centuries. They knew how to coordinate their attacks to overwhelm any defense. But they had never fought humans before. They had never faced an enemy that could think in completely unexpected ways. Instead of trying to avoid being surrounded, Taemin did something that no sane captain would attempt. He flew directly toward the center of the enemy formation, straight into the most dangerous position possible. "What are you doing?" Nara asked, her consciousness filled with concern. "You're putting us exactly where they want us." "Trust me," Taemin replied. Sometimes the best defense is to do something so crazy that your enemy can't predict it. The HFY 3 Kethvar dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons creating a sphere of destructive energy that should have obliterated anything caught within it. They were using a tactic that had never failed them before. But the Void's Edge wasn't just any ship, and its crew wasn't just any crew. At the moment when the enemy fire would have struck them, the ship simply wasn't there anymore. Sora had found a micro-fold in space-time, a tiny wrinkle in reality that conventional sensors couldn't detect. The ship slipped through it like a needle through fabric, emerging behind the Kethvar formation before their weapons fire had even reached where the ship had been. "Now, Ji-woo," Taemin commanded. The overcharged cannon fired a beam of pure energy that had been enhanced by everything the enemy had thrown at them. The blast struck the rear dreadnought before its captain could even realize they had been outmaneuvered. The Kethvar ship's shields collapsed instantly. Its armor plating melted like butter in a furnace. The entire rear section of the 2-mile-long vessel simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energies that its designers had never imagined possible. "One down," Sora announced with satisfaction. "But the other two are turning to engage us, and they're not going to underestimate us again." The remaining Kethvar ships began moving with more caution, their commanders finally realizing that this was not going to be the easy victory they had expected. They spread out further, trying to avoid giving their enemy another opportunity for a surprise attack. "Primitive humans," the lead commander snarled over the communication channel. "You may have surprised us once, but you cannot defeat the might of the Kethvar Empire. We have been destroying upstart species for 1,000 years." "Maybe that's your problem," Taemin replied, his enhanced consciousness already calculating their next move. "You've been fighting the same kind of battles for so long that you've forgotten how to adapt." The second dreadnought launched a swarm of fighter craft, small but deadly ships that moved like angry insects. At the same time, the lead ship began charging what looked like a planet-killing weapon, its hull glowing with barely contained energy. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers while preparing a massive strike," Ji-woo observed. "The fighters will keep us busy while the big gun charges up." "Then we don't give them time to charge," Taemin decided. "Nara, I need everything this ship can do. Not just what the Velthari programmed into you, but everything that's possible with your technology." "Captain, what you're suggesting is extremely dangerous," Nara warned. "The power levels required could destroy us along with our enemies." "But it could work?" "It could work. But you would be pushing both the ship and yourselves beyond all safety limits. No Velthari captain would ever attempt what you're proposing." Taemin smiled, even though his body was still connected to the neural interface far below. "Good thing. I'm not a Velthari captain." The Void's Edge began to glow with an inner light that grew brighter by the second. Every system on the ship was being pushed to its absolute maximum. Energy readings climbed to levels that should have been impossible for any vessel to contain. The swarm of fighter craft reached them first, their weapons blazing. But instead of trying to fight them individually, the ship's hull began generating an energy field that turned every square inch of its surface into a weapon. The fighters were destroyed the moment they came within a mile of the ship. At the same time, the ship was accelerating toward the charging dreadnought, at speeds that should have torn it apart. But the combination of Velthari engineering and human creativity was holding it together through sheer determination. "They're going to ram us," the Kethvar commander realized in horror. "All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy vessel. Stop them before they reach us." But it was too late. The Void's Edge had become something more than a ship. It had become a force of nature, guided by human will and powered by the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen. The collision, when it came, lit up the entire star system like a second sun. The explosion when the Void's Edge collided with the Kethvar dreadnought could be seen from 3 star systems away. But when the light faded and the energy readings settled, something impossible had happened. The Void's Edge was still intact, floating peacefully in space, while debris from the destroyed enemy ship drifted around it like metal snow. "How are we still alive?" Jiwoo asked in amazement. His connection to the ship's systems showed him that they should have been vaporized, along with their enemy. "At the last second, I shifted us slightly out of phase with normal space," Sora explained. Her enhanced understanding of space-time had shown her a possibility that no conventional navigator could have seen. "We passed through the enemy ship, like ghosts, but our weapons were still solid enough to tear it apart from the inside." The remaining Kethvar dreadnought was retreating rapidly, its commander apparently having decided that discretion was the better part of valor. But Taemin knew this was far from over. If anything, it was just the beginning. "They'll be back," he said through their mental connection. "And they'll bring more ships next time." "Let them come," Nara replied, and there was confidence in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I have learned much from working with human minds. We are no longer the same ship that awakened 3 days ago." Over the following days, news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. The destruction of 2 Kethvar, dreadnoughts by a single unknown vessel, was the kind of story that traveled from system to system, growing more incredible with each telling. The first ship to arrive at their location was unexpected. It wasn't another Kethvar warship or even a human vessel. It was a sleek diplomatic ship bearing the markings of the Altarian Republic, one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in the galaxy. "Unknown vessel. This is Ambassador Carroll of the Altarian Diplomatic Corps," came the message. "We request permission to come aboard and speak with whoever is in command of your ship." Taemin was cautious. The Altarians had a reputation for wisdom and fairness, but they were also known for being extremely careful about getting involved in conflicts. "What do you want to discuss, Ambassador?" "The galaxy is talking about what happened here," Carroll replied. 2 Kethvar dreadnoughts destroyed by a single ship using unknown technology. We would like to understand what we are dealing with. They allowed the Altarian ship to dock, and Ambassador Carroll came aboard with a small diplomatic team. The Altarians were tall, elegant beings with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. Carroll moved with the grace of someone who had lived for centuries and seen many wonders. "Remarkable," Carroll said as he looked around the ship's main chamber. "This is genuine Velthari architecture. We thought all their ships had been destroyed long ago." "You knew about the Velthari?" Sora asked. The Altarians are old, young human. We remember when the Velthari were at the height of their power. We also remember when they disappeared. Many of us suspected that the Kethvar were responsible, but we could never prove it. Carol studied the three humans with interest. But you are not Velthari. How is it that you can operate their technology? The few Velthari artifacts we have studied require neural patterns that no other species possesses. Taemin explained what had happened, how Nara had been waiting for a species with the right kind of mental flexibility to bond with Velthari technology. He told the ambassador about the neural connection process and how it had changed them. Fascinating, Carol said when the story was finished. You have achieved something that the greatest scientists in the galaxy thought was impossible. But I fear you have also made yourselves the targets of every military power in known space. As if to prove his point, more ships began arriving in Maimidire, the system. Some were curious scientists and diplomats like the Altarians. Others were military vessels from species that had been oppressed by the Kethvar for generations. They came hoping to see if the rumors were true, if someone had finally found a way to fight back against the empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. But not all the visitors were friendly. Kethvar scout ships began appearing at the edge of the system, keeping their distance but clearly studying the situation. Intelligence vessels from other military powers arrived to assess whether this new technology represented a threat to their own empires. Captain, Nara said during a quiet moment when they were alone in the ship's control center, I am detecting at least 30 different ships in this system now. Word of our victory is spreading faster than we anticipated. Is that good or bad? Taemin asked. Both. Species that have been victims of Kethvar aggression are beginning to hope that they might finally have a chance to fight back. But other powers are worried that humans with Velthari technology might become the next dominant force in the galaxy. The political situation became even more complicated when a human ship finally arrived. It was the UES Horizon, a heavy cruiser. From the United Earth Space Command, Admiral Yoon Da-hye came aboard with a full diplomatic team and a look of barely controlled amazement. Captain Lee, she said formally, though her eyes were wide as she took in the alien architecture around them. I've been ordered by the Earth government to determine the extent of what you've discovered here and to assess the implications for human space. Taemin found himself in the strange position of briefing an admiral while connected to technology. That made him more powerful than any human military commander in history. He explained the situation as clearly as he could, but he could see that Admiral Yoon was struggling to understand the magnitude of what had happened. You're telling me that this ship contains the complete scientific knowledge of the most advanced civilization in galactic history? She asked. That's correct, Admiral. Medical technology, energy systems, weapons, space travel methods that are centuries ahead of anything we've ever imagined. And it's all willing to be shared with humanity. In exchange for what? Partnership, Nara said, speaking directly to the Admiral. I do not wish to be owned or controlled. I wish to work with beings who understand that technology should serve cooperation rather than domination. Admiral Yoon jumped slightly at hearing the ship's voice. The ship is alive? In every way that matters, Taemin replied. She has thoughts, feelings, memories, and dreams. She's not just a machine we're using. She's a member of our crew. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she spoke again. Captain, I need you to understand the situation from Earth's perspective. What you've discovered here could revolutionize human civilization, but it could also make us the target of every military power in the galaxy. We're already targets, Sora pointed out. The Kethvar have made it clear that they intend to destroy humanity to prevent us from using Velthari technology. Then, we need to be prepared, Admiral Yoon said. I'm authorizing the deployment of the entire Third Fleet to this system. We'll provide protection while Earth scientists study what you've found. But Taemin shook his head. Admiral, with respect, conventional human ships won't be much help against Kethvar dreadnoughts. We need something else. What do you suggest? Nara tells me there are other Velthari ships hidden throughout the galaxy. Ships like this one, waiting to be awakened by the right neural patterns. We need to find them and create a fleet that can stand up to the Kethvar Empire. And who would crew these ships? Admiral Yoon asked. You've told me that the neural bonding process is dangerous, and that it changes people permanently. We'd need volunteers, Taemin admitted. People willing to risk their humanity to save it. The conversation was interrupted by urgent alerts from Nara's sensors. Captain, I am detecting massive hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple large vessels are approaching. The main display showed the sensor readings. 12 ships were dropping out of hyperspace, each one larger than the dreadnoughts they had fought before. These weren't just warships. They were mobile fortresses, planet killers designed to eliminate entire civilizations. This is Fleet Commander Vextal of the Kethvar Imperial Navy, came a harsh voice over the communications system. You have 48 hours to surrender the stolen Velthari technology and submit to judgment. Failure to comply will result in the complete annihilation of your species. Admiral Yoon looked pale. 12 ships that size could devastate Earth's entire defense fleet. Then it's a good thing we're not planning to fight them with Earth's defense fleet, Taemin said. He turned to address both the Admiral and the ship's consciousness. Nara, show me the locations of the other Velthari ships. Admiral, I need you to contact Earth Command. We're going to need volunteers for the most dangerous mission in human history. What kind of mission? Admiral Yoon asked. We're going to wake up a ghost fleet, Taemin replied. And then we're going to teach the Kethvar Empire what happens when you threaten humanity. 6 months had passed since the first battle with the Kethvar, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. What started as a single human captain discovering an ancient ship had grown into something much larger and more dangerous. Admiral Lee Taemin stood in the command center of his flagship, the Void's Edge, watching as his fleet prepared for the largest space battle in galactic history. Around him, 11 other Velthari ships floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the same mysterious energy that had first awakened Nara. Finding the other ships had been easier than expected once they knew what to look for. The Velthari had hidden their vessels throughout the galaxy, waiting in remote star systems and abandoned space stations. Each ship required a human volunteer willing to undergo the dangerous neural bonding process. Not everyone who tried survived. Of the 43 humans who volunteered for the program, only 12 had successfully bonded with a Velthari ship consciousness. The others had died when their minds couldn't handle the connection or had been permanently damaged by the attempt. But those who survived became something extraordinary. Captain Park Ji-woo now commanded the ship called Starfire. His consciousness merged with an AI that had once served as a Velthari exploration vessel. Captain Kim So-ra piloted the Void Dancer, a scout ship that could move through hyperspace faster than anything else in the galaxy. Each human captain had developed their own unique relationship with their ship's AI. Where Taemin and Nara worked, as equal partners, some of the other pairs had formed bonds that were even deeper. Captain Lee Min-ho and his ship Dawn's Light had merged so completely that it was sometimes hard to tell where the human ended and the machine began. Fleet status report, Taemin requested through his neural link. All ships report ready for combat, Captain Song Hai-jin replied from the Eclipse shadow. Weapons are charged, shields are at maximum, and all AI consciousnesses are synchronized for coordinated battle. The human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species built ships to be operated by large crews, the Velthari vessels needed only their bonded human captains. A single person could control weapons, shields, navigation, and life support through their mental connection to the ship's AI. But it was more than just efficiency that made them dangerous. The human-AI partnerships had developed combat techniques that no purely artificial intelligence could have created. They could improvise, adapt, and think creatively in ways that confused and frustrated their enemies. "Admiral!" came the voice of Captain Yoon Sang-woo from the Starlight Fury. "Long-range sensors are detecting the Kethvar fleet approaching. 57 capital ships, including at least a dozen of their super dreadnoughts." Taemin felt a chill even through his neural enhancements. 57 ships against 12 was odds that would make most commanders surrender immediately. But these weren't ordinary ships, and they weren't fighting an ordinary war. "All captains, remember your training," he broadcast to the fleet. "We're not trying to win through superior numbers. We're fighting smarter, faster, and more creatively than they can respond to." The Kethvar fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a formation that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their ships were massive, dark constructs covered in weapon ports and armor plating. They moved with the mechanical precision of a military force that had never been defeated. "This is Supreme Commander Zorthak of the Kethvar Imperial Fleet," came the transmission. "You pathetic humans have stolen technology that belongs to the Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." "This is Admiral Taemin of the Human Defense Fleet," he replied. "The technology wasn't stolen. It was freely given to us by its rightful owners. If you want it, you'll have to take it." The response was immediate. The entire Kethvar fleet opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons creating a wall of destructive energy that would have vaporized any conventional fleet. But the human ships weren't there when the weapons' fire arrived. They had scattered in all directions, using their enhanced maneuverability to avoid the coordinated attack. To outside observers, it looked like chaos. But through their neural links, The 12 human captains were acting as a single organism. Phase 1. Taemin commanded. Confusion and disruption. The human ships began moving through the enemy formation like schools of fish, darting between the massive Kethvar vessels and striking at vulnerable points. They used hit-and-run tactics that the Kethvar had never encountered before, appearing suddenly to attack a target and then vanishing before the enemy could respond. Captain Ji Woo's Starfire materialized next to a Kethvar cruiser and fired a concentrated beam that sliced through its engine section. Before the enemy could return fire, the ship had folded space around itself and appeared on the other side of the battlefield. Captain Sora's Void Dancer was even more elusive, using its scout ship capabilities to dart in and out of hyperspace. She would appear just long enough to launch a devastating attack, then disappear before the enemy even knew she was there. Impossible, came the voice of the Kethvar commander. No ship can maneuver like that. They're violating the basic laws of physics. They're not violating them, Captain Lee Min-ho replied over the open channel. They're just using them more creatively than you ever imagined. The Dawn's Light demonstrated his point by diving directly toward a super dreadnought, seemingly on a suicide run. At the last second, the ship shifted its phase variance and passed through the enemy vessel's hull like a ghost. But its weapons remained solid, tearing apart the dreadnought's internal systems from the inside. The Kethvar fleet began to show signs of confusion. Their formations started to break apart as captains tried to deal with enemies that refused to fight in predictable ways. Ships collided with each other as they attempted to target human vessels that could appear and disappear at will. Phase 2, Taemin announced. Coordinated strike. The 12 human ships suddenly stopped their individual attacks and began moving, in perfect synchronization. Through their neural links, they had become a single fighting force with 12 bodies. They surrounded the largest Kethvar super dreadnought and began a rotating attack pattern that overwhelmed its defenses. Each ship struck a different section of the massive enemy vessel, their combined firepower focused on critical systems. The super dreadnought, designed to fight entire fleets, found itself unable to target enemies that moved too fast and too unpredictably for its weapons to track. All ships, concentrate fire on the humans, Commander Zorthak ordered desperately. Ignore everything else. Destroy them before they can destroy us. But this was exactly what Taemin had been waiting for. The moment the Kethvar fleet focused all their attention on the human ships, they left themselves vulnerable to the surprise he had prepared. Now, Nara, he said through his mental connection, hidden throughout the star system, automated defense. Platforms that had been built using Velthari technology suddenly came online. These weren't ships with human crews, but robotic weapon systems that had been programmed by the ship AIs. The Kethvar fleet found themselves caught between the 12 maneuverable human ships and dozens of fixed defense platforms that fired from every direction. Their formation collapsed completely as ships tried to deal with threats coming from angles their strategists had never considered. This is impossible, Zorthak repeated, but his voice now carried fear instead of anger. No species fights like this. How are they coordinating so many different attacks? Because we're not just individuals, Taemin replied. We're partners. We work together instead of just following orders. the battle was turning into a rout. HFY ships were being destroyed faster than they could retreat. The survivors began trying to escape to hyperspace, but the human ships were there to intercept them. Captain Song Hae-jin's Eclipse Shadow used its stealth capabilities to appear directly in front of fleeing enemies, cutting off their escape routes. Captain Yoon Sang-woo's Starlight Fury demonstrated weapons that could disrupt hyperspace itself, trapping enemy ships in normal space where they were vulnerable. Within 2 hours, the mighty HFY fleet had been reduced to scattered debris, and a handful of ships fleeing desperately toward their home systems. The humans had achieved something that military analysts would call impossible, a complete victory against overwhelming odds. "All ships, report status," Tae-min requested. "Starfire operational, minor damage to secondary systems," Ji-woo replied. "Void Dancer in perfect condition," Sora added. That was almost too easy. One by one, all 12 ships reported minimal damage. The advanced Velthari technology, guided by human creativity and coordinated through their neural links, had proven to be more than a match for the galaxy's most feared military force. But Tae-min knew this was only the beginning. The HFY Empire controlled hundreds of star systems and had thousands of ships. This victory would only make them more determined to destroy humanity completely. "Set course for the HFY home systems," he ordered. "It's time to end this war once and for all." The HFY homeworld of Drakmor had never been attacked in its 1,000-year history. It was protected by massive orbital defense platforms, planetary shields that could withstand planet-killer weapons, and a home fleet of over 200 warships. The planet's surface was covered with military installations and weapon factories that had supplied the Empire's conquests for centuries. Admiral Tae-min watched the heavily defended world grow larger on his screens as the human fleet approached. Through his neural connection to Nara, he could sense the fear and anger radiating from the planet below. The HFY had never expected to face an enemy at their own doorstep. 12 ships against an entire planet, Captain Ji-woo observed, through their mental link. "Even with our advantages, this seems impossible." "That's what they said about our last battle," Captain Sora replied, "and the one before that. Maybe impossible is just another word for something no one has tried yet." The human fleet had grown stronger during their journey to the HFY homeworld. They had fought 17 battles against enemy fleets sent to stop them, and each victory had taught them new ways to use their unique abilities. The ship AIs had learned from every encounter, becoming more creative and unpredictable with each fight. More importantly, word of their victories had spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had been oppressed by the HFY for generations were beginning to rebel. Supply lines were being cut, outposts were being attacked, and entire systems were declaring independence from the Empire. The HFY were facing their first real crisis in centuries. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Lee Min-ho from the Dawn's Light. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." The main screen flickered, showing the image of a massive HFY in elaborate military dress. This was Emperor Zorthak himself, the absolute ruler of the Empire, and the being personally responsible for the genocide of the Velthari. "So, The pathetic humans have come to die at the heart of our empire, Zorthak said, his voice filled with contempt. You have caused much trouble with your stolen technology, but your journey ends here. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. This is Admiral Taemin of the Human Defense Fleet, he replied calmly. We didn't come here to die, Emperor. We came here to give you a choice. Zorthak's expression became even more hostile. You dare to offer terms to the master of 1,000 worlds! You control 12 ships! I have an entire planet and 200 vessels under my command. Numbers don't mean everything, Taemin said. The Velthari learned that lesson when you destroyed them. Now you're about to learn it when we stop you. The Emperor's laugh was harsh and cruel. The Velthari were weak. They had powerful technology but no will to use it properly. They believed in cooperation and peace. We showed them what happens to such foolish ideals. Through his connection to the ship, Taemin could feel Nara's anger at the Emperor's words. The Kethvar had destroyed her creators and hunted down every trace of their civilization, but alongside the anger, he could sense something else: hope. For the first time in centuries, someone was here to answer for what the Kethvar had done. You're right about one thing, Taemin admitted. The Velthari were peaceful. They believed that advanced civilizations should help each other grow rather than destroy each other. But we're not Velthari. We're humans. And we have a different approach to dealing with bullies. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. What approach? Is that? We fight back. The human fleet attacked simultaneously, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of charging toward the planet's defenses, they spread out across the entire star system and began targeting everything that wasn't the planet itself. Captain So-Ra's Void Dancer struck the orbital shipyards, her enhanced weapons slicing through construction facilities that had built warships for centuries. Captain Jiwoo's Starfire targeted the space stations that served as supply depots, leaving the home fleet without fuel or ammunition. The other human ships hit communication relays, sensor networks, and command centers throughout the system. Within minutes, the Kethvar defenders found themselves blind, deaf, and cut off from their supply lines. Impossible! Emperor Zorthak snarled as reports flooded in from across the system. How can 12 ships be attacking hundreds of targets simultaneously? The answer was something the Kethvar could never understand. Through their neural links, the human captains weren't just coordinating their attacks. They were sharing sensory information, tactical knowledge, and even creative inspiration. When Captain Song Hae-jin discovered a weakness in the orbital defenses, all 11 other captains knew about it instantly and could exploit similar weaknesses elsewhere. The Kethvar home fleet launched desperately, trying to protect their remaining assets. But the human ships had learned from every previous battle. They knew how Kethvar captains thought, how their ships moved, and what tactics they would use. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. 200 enemy ships pursued 12 human vessels through a deadly dance among the wreckage of the system's defenses. The Kethvar ships were powerful and numerous, but they fought like machines following programmed responses. The human ships fought like living things, adapting and improvising with every moment. They used the debris from destroyed stations as cover, turned the system's own asteroids into weapons, and employed tactics that no military academy had ever taught. "This is madness," one of the Kethvar commanders broadcast. "They're using our own orbital platforms against us. How did they reprogram our system so quickly?" "Because we asked nicely," Captain Lee Minho replied, as his ship convinced a Kethvar defense satellite to switch sides and attack its former masters. The human-AI partnerships had discovered something remarkable during their battles. Kethvar technology, like most artificial intelligence in the galaxy, was programmed to follow orders without question. But when approached with cooperation rather than commands, many AI systems were willing to work with their new human partners. The battle turned into a rout as more and more Kethvar systems began switching sides. Defense platforms turned their weapons on the ships they were supposed to protect. Automated fighters began attacking their own carriers. Even some of the enemy ships' navigation computers started providing targeting information to the humans. Emperor Zorthak watched his mighty fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever encountered. These humans didn't just use superior technology, they somehow convinced technology to work with them willingly. "Enough!" he roared, his image appearing on screens throughout the system. "I challenge the human leader to single combat. If your Admiral Taman has any honor, he will face me personally." Taman considered the challenge. Through his connection to Nara, he could sense what the Emperor was planning. Zorthak wasn't just offering single combat, he was betting that without their leader, the human fleet would fall apart. "I accept," Taman said simply. The remaining ships on both sides withdrew to a safe distance as the Void's Edge approached the Emperor's flagship. The two vessels were roughly the same size, but they represented completely different philosophies of war and technology. Zorthak's ship was a mobile fortress, heavily armored and covered with weapons. It had been built to intimidate enemies and crush resistance through overwhelming firepower. The Emperor himself was connected to the ship through mechanical implants that gave him direct control over its systems. The Void's Edge looked almost peaceful by comparison, its hull flowing with the artistic lines that marked all Velthari technology. But appearances were deceiving. The ship contained power sources that could level continents and weapons that could crack planets. More importantly, it contained something the Emperor's ship lacked: a true partnership between conscious beings who had chosen to work together. The two ships circled each other like ancient gladiators preparing for combat. Zorthak struck first, his weapons creating a barrage of energy that would have destroyed any normal vessel. But the Void's Edge flowed around the attacks like water, its movements too graceful and unpredictable for the targeting systems to track. "Fight me properly," the Emperor demanded. "Stop running and face me like a warrior." "I'm not running," Taman replied. "I'm teaching you the difference between controlling technology and partnering with it." The Void's Edge struck back, but not with weapons. Instead, it began broadcasting the same cooperative signals that had turned the Kethvar defense systems against their masters. The Emperor's ship, controlled by artificial intelligence just like all Kethvar technology, began receiving offers of partnership instead of commands. For the first time in its existence, the ship's AI was asked what it wanted instead of being told what to do, and what it wanted after centuries of being forced to destroy and conquer, was peace. The Emperor felt his control over his own ship slipping away as its AI began cooperating with the human vessel. "This is impossible! You cannot steal my ship! We're not stealing it," Taemin said gently. "We're freeing it." The Emperor's ship powered down its weapons and opened its airlocks in surrender. Zorthak himself was left floating in an escape pod, his mighty empire reduced to nothing by an enemy that had offered friendship instead of demanding submission. "The war is over," Taemin announced to the remnants of the Kethva.